one guy that I have liked for the past probably 3 years is Alvin Kamara. And he has performed time and time again with Drew Brees as his quarterback. So this year it'll be different to see how he performs with either Taysom Hill or Jameis Winston, depending on who wins that battle. But he is, in my opinion, I think he's going to be relied heavily on to run the ball. He's also going to be a check down receiver, as he has been in the years past with Drew Brees. Last year, he only finished number 2 behind Derrick Henry. I am Garrett.
I am Brandon.
We are here to talk about GOATs.
So we're going to talk about, discuss, debate the greatest of all time,
Barry Sanders,
Hockenson. You're listening to the Goat Herders Podcast, where we herd the greatest of all time. Welcome back to the Goat Herders Podcast. I'm Brandon.
And I'm Garrett.
And this week, we are talking fantasy football. We've got our top players from the 4 big positions, and we got some deep sleepers that we're going to talk about. Garrett's going to kind of take this away. As you're getting ready for your fantasy football draft, you want to hear what Garrett's got to say and maybe help you bring home the championship in 2021. So what are you thinking, Garrett?
All right. I'm just going to break it down here position by position, give you the top players and top sleepers. Starting with quarterbacks. We're going to start right off with Patrick Mahomes, like obvious number 1 pick. There's no other quarterback that is measuring up to him fantasy wise in the league with what he can do with his legs, what he can do with his arm, the weapons that he has in Kansas City. He is by far the number 1 QB in the league per fantasy. Last year he didn't finish there. Go ahead.
If I remember, you have made some pretty bold predictions about what he could be as far as GOAT greatest of all time, right?
Yeah, he could be. Like I said, he needed a lot of time to develop there, but he is definitely on track to be a GOAT of quarterbacks. He's got a lot of his career left to perform, and we'll see where he goes. But I think this next year he's going to be the GOAT of 2021 for fantasy points. So next on the list, my sleeper for quarterback, being a Lions fan, I stick with my Lions here, and not Goff, but I'm going to go with Stafford. He finished 15th overall fantasy quarterbacks with the weak Lions team. They did not have the greatest offense, and he still finished with number 15 in points. He's projected to be 10th overall with the Rams this year. But with the weapons that he has in Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods, Deshaun Jackson got added to their team. They're Tyler Higbee. They've got a lot of weapons, and they're deep. I could see him finishing top 7, maybe even top 5 this year at the quarterback position for fantasy points. So that's what I've got for quarterbacks.
I love the Stafford pick. I've always liked Stafford, but as a fantasy owner, I've always thought, nah, I can't take Stafford. It's just never going to go well. So, yeah. I might have to take Stafford this year.
Yeah, I've always taken him as a Lions fan, and he put up big numbers with the first year with Calvin Johnson, where it was just like, let's throw the ball at Calvin Johnson, and they set all those records, and he put up over 5,000 yards. Like he's very capable. Moving on to running backs. This one gets a little bit harder to predict because it's going to it could change with injuries. It could change with lots of things. One guy that I have liked for the past probably 3 years is Alvin Kamara. And he has performed time and time again with Drew Brees as his quarterback. So this year it'll be different to see how he performs with either Taysom Hill or Jameis Winston, depending on who wins that battle. But he is, in my opinion, I think he's going to be relied heavily on to run the ball. He's also going to be a check down receiver, as he has been in the years past with Drew Brees. Last year, he only finished number 2 behind Derrick Henry, who also just had a fantastic blowout year and could just run over everybody. So he is my number 1 running back going into the season. My sleepers then, this one's probably a little biased. I will be straight honest with that. But I think the Lions running backs as a core, if one of them steps up and shines among DeAndre Swift Adrian Peterson, and Jamal Williams. One of those three guys, I
No
think,
worries. You only have to take 3 roster spots. And Mike is lucky.
Yeah, just draft all 3 of those guys. One of them is going to break out.
Wasn't it last year when you were like, I want the Lions running backs, and then I took all of them for you, and you're like, I didn't need all of them, and I'm like, you said they were must-haves.
This is true. Brandon did do one of my drafts for me because I was busy that night, and I did say I wanted some Lions running backs, but DeAndre Swift, if he can stay healthy, that's the key to him. Like, he has the talent, he has the ability. He just has to stay healthy if he's going to be a big performer. Jamal Williams also has been a huge impact, even when he was with the Packers behind Aaron Jones. When he was in the games, he made those big plays. So that's been huge for him.
He was
so
phenomenal.
He could step
even when Aaron Jones was playing. There were multiple weeks where I would start Jamal Williams and Aaron Jones, and they would do just fine.
Yeah, and that's with a high potent offense too. That Brandon talked about last episode, is that you want to hit those high potent offenses. The Packers definitely one of them. So they had those points to go around. So Jamal Williams could step up to become a number 1 running back for the Lions if Swift gets injured. And then you got Adrian Peterson, who's always been big on the goal line, getting those touchdowns. And he's looking to finish up his career here soon. I love him. He's had a great career. He's not really fantasy relevant as much anymore. He'll get to a touchdown maybe here or there, but I think DeAndre Swift or Jamal Williams definitely could be. On a less biased note, the other 2 running backs I want to highlight as sleepers are Daryl Henderson, running back for the Rams, who had a pretty decent year last year while fighting for reps with Cam Akers. And he's just part of an offense that now has Matthew Stafford, that gave Todd Gurley 19 touchdowns in 2019 on a year when Gurley did not have as many yards or as big of a year as he had in 2018. So I think Henderson could have a breakout year fantasy points wise. The only other running back on that team worth note is Sony Michelle, former Patriots running back, who's always just been a secondhand guy that has never been a huge fantasy threat. So I think Henderson could have a breakout year as well. My final guy is James Robinson, who last year came out of the shadows and was a huge player that was not expected to be a big player. Then when Jacksonville went out and drafted Travis Etienne, I just butcher his name every single time. Hold on. Travis Etienne every time. They drafted Travis Etienne, and he went and got injured in preseason. He's done for the year. So while that put a damp on Robinson's draft stock early on, if you had early drafts, if you've got these late drafts that you still need to draft your team yet, he's a name to look for as a RB2 or a flex option. Could even be a running back 1, depending on how Trevor Lawrence does with them. So that wraps up my running backs. Brandon, any comments on that?
About Kamara, I think there's a high risk, high reward there. We don't know what his offense is going to be like, and so it's highly reliant on Kamara. But if the quarterbacks can't perform, and Jameis Winston, Taysom Hill are not known for being high performing quarterbacks, we could see Kamara really fall off. And so love him. He's a great talent, great running back, and has done some amazing things. But definitely some pretty substantial risk there as well, in my opinion.
I agree with that. I'm actually debating between him and one of the wide receivers I'm about to talk about in my keeper league going into this year, if I'm going to be keeping Kamara, if I'm going to be keeping perfect transition here, Calvin Ridley. He is my number 1 wide receiver off the board this year. He's a little lower on rankings. He is, I think, the number 4 wide receiver overall, behind a couple of big names. Number 5 on some of them. Just depends on which board you're looking at. But I really like him this year because last year he finished 4th overall in fantasy numbers while being behind Julio Jones for a good portion of the year before Julio finally went out and didn't play for the rest of the year. And now that Julio Jones got traded to the Titans, I see him stepping up and being a huge target for Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan isn't what he used to be. He's not the guy that's going to take a team to a Super Bowl. I think he's still got enough left in the cannon to give Calvin Ridley a big fantasy year, though. And they don't have many other big name guys on their team. None worth mentioning for fantasy at all. So he's going to be the number one guy on the Falcons this year for wide receivers. Then my two sleepers for wide receivers. The first one, T. Higgins with Cincinnati Bengals. He finished 28th last year in fantasy points. He's projected to finish right around the same this year. The difference is that last year he had two no-name quarterbacks thrown to him for over half the season. 10 out of the 16 games, he did not have Joe Burrow at the helm. And with Joe Burrow being back and being able to do what he did for the first 6 weeks, I think that T. Higgins could be primed as one of these second year, third year. He's one of those, I don't remember which year he was drafted, but he's going into, I think, his third year. I think this is going to be his third year. I could be wrong. It could be second. Can't fact check that.
It's a good time for him to break out. That's all we got to say.
Yeah, that's what I got to say. Thanks, Brandon. I think that he's going to finish top 15 wide receivers this year. So he'll be much higher than his draft stock.
Yeah, and we haven't really gotten to see Joe Burrow perform as we would hope and expect from such a high prospect. So this, again, another great breakout opportunity there, and looking for what can be around him. I like that a lot.
Right. So then my second sleeper is a former Lion. I'm sticking with these Lions here, getting one in each category. Marvin Jones Jr. Sadly, no longer with the Lions, but he is competing with Chenault for the top spot in Jacksonville to be the top receiver for Trevor Lawrence. Again, this is another one of those situations that's going to be based on how well does the quarterback perform, just like we're talking about the Saints. How well is Taysom Hill or Jameis Winston going to perform? For Kamara, how well is Trevor Lawrence going to perform for these two top receivers in Jones and Chenault? Last year with the Lions, Jones finished 15th overall for wide receivers, and he's projected to be 52nd overall for wide receivers. So I think that he's going to be finishing way above that. I think he's going to come in there as a leader on that team. He came in as a senior on the Lions team and was a big example, a big influence on their wide receiver crew. Coming in with the Urban Meyer and with Trevor Lawrence, I think that he could step up and make some big plays for Jacksonville down the road here and finish in the top 20, at least the top 20 for receivers this year. So that's what I have for wide receivers. Brandon, any comments on them?
I think Marvin Jones is a very interesting player because he has always been undervalued and overperformed. And I think it's because of where he played and how hit or miss he could be, but that has been a traditional thing. Every year he seems to be higher than people expect him to be. And so that seems to be a pattern, and I don't see any reason why that could be this year as well.
Right. And the two teams that he's played for, neither one of them have won a playoff game in 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
So he's been about, I do remember, I don't remember if it was week 1, week 2, he had 3 touchdowns with the Lions in over 200 yards. I remember seeing that game, and I don't know if I had him on my team at that point, or if he was on the free agency, but I just remember man, that was a lot of points to not have on your team for that week. So he's definitely someone that can break out. Then we hit our last position that we're going to talk about today, and that's the tight ends. And I am going to go with my Lion as my number 1 pick this year.
At this point, we might as well have you're going to just have all Lions or former Lions as your fantasy team.
That's how I work. That's how I work, man. And I'm champion last year and second place. I was in 2 leagues. I got a first and a second. with lots of Lions on my teams, you know.
Attaboy.
You just got to know when to play them. You just got to know when to hold them, not when to fold them.
I'm folding them, but go on.
TJ Hockenson. We're not talking Kelsey. We're not talking Waller. We're not talking Niddle. TJ Hockenson is primed for the biggest year of his career. And a lot of people were saying last year was his peak, and that's where he's going to be at. This year, I think he's going to be even bigger. And here's why. The Lions wide receiver core is mediocre at best right now. And it's sad to talk about. Rashad Perryman and Tyrell Williams are their top two names, and they have not even been a number one name on anyone's team ever. They've always been shadowing some other team as a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3.
So much talent there. They just have never performed quite.
Right.
No.
And I just read an article today about Perryman potentially not making the team. And he was projected their number 1 wide receiver. So they're looking weak in the wide receiver category, but that leaves room for their tight ends and their running backs to step up. So I am seeing TJ Hockenson stepping up and being the number 1 big call right here. Number 1 tight end this year in fantasy. I'm going to call that undisputed. He will be the number 1 tight end in fantasy football this year.
He is a bold one.
You heard it here first. Not Kelsey, not Waller, not Tanyan. It's gonna be Kelsey. Or it's not gonna be Kelsey. It's gonna be Hockenson.
I agree.
Hockenson.
It's gonna be Kelsey. I really do think it's gonna be Kelsey, but
it's been Kelsey the last couple of years, and I know like he's good. He's on a great team. I think Hawkinson's gonna outperform him this year. So that's my number 1 tight end pick. The sleepers. And with tight ends, this is the thing with tight ends. They're going to make or break your roster. They're going to put up 15 points, or they're going to put up 0. Like, it's really hard to guess. So my sleepers, pretty much just throw a dart at one of these names, and you might have a chance at hitting something. You've got Irv Smith with the Vikings. He no longer has Kyle Rudolph to play behind. And they were huge on focusing on or targeting tight ends in the red zone. You've got Anthony Firkser, who was opposite Jonnu Smith with the Titans last year, and it felt like every week one of those two guys was going off. I had Jonnu Smith for a while when he was hot, then he cooled off and Firkser stepped up. With Jonnu Smith gone, he's over with the Patriots now. He's another guy you could add to this list if you wanted to. I think Firkser could be putting up some big points with Ryan Tannehill at quarterback, and that's another high potent offense coming in this year. And then finally,
go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I would add with the tight ends. I actually, having come from leagues where tight ends weren't required to where they are now, my mindset has shifted on tight ends where I really do want one of the top 4, because the gap between the top tight ends and the 12th tight end is so massive that it is, in my opinion, essential to get one of those top tight ends. Pay up for that, in my opinion, because you are going to overmatch every one of your opponents if you have one of the top 5 tight ends, because everything else, it just falls off dramatically from there. And that's not the case at any of the other positions. It's not nearly as dramatic.
Right. And I think this year, I think you've got a big five, and then after that, it's nobody. I think you've got Travis Kelce, Kittle, Waller, TJ Hockenson, and then you've got Kyle Pitts, the rookie this year that was the highest drafted tight end after Hockenson. Hockenson held that for a couple of years, and now Pitts came out coming out of I don't remember where he was drafted from. But anyway, he went to the Falcons. He could have a huge year as well. But he's unproven. He could step up. You never know where that's going to go. But after those 5 guys, it's a crapshoot. You don't know what you're going to get. You don't know what you're going to get for points any given day. So my final sleeper there, and this could be completely off the wall. This completely incorrect. Is any Houston tight end. The situation that they're in with not knowing who their quarterback's going to be, they don't have a good offense at all. Like, they're looking to be the bottom. They could be the next 0-16 team.
I think you're off for Waller on this one.
Yeah, I might be. But I was thinking any of those guys. Jordan Atkins is their number one right now. Farrell Brown. They've got two other, Ryan Izzo and Brevin Jordan. I'm guessing all four of those guys will not make the team, but one of those guys, Jordan Atkins, I think has the best chance to have a couple big games if you need to pick someone up. But just keep an eye on them. Keep an eye who they're playing and how they're doing. I would not probably draft any of these guys. These would be guys that I'd pick up for my Travis Kelce bye week or my TJ Hockenson bye week in a really deep league that could put up some points for you. So that's what I've got for my top four positions and the sleepers and my top picks for that.
So that's a lot of great information. Do you have any, like, this one bold prediction to kind of wrap this all out?
I mean, TJ Hockenson going number one tight end overall was a big one. I think bold prediction would be Ridley being number one wide receiver this year. That's a bold prediction that I don't have many cojones behind. But if you want me to get bold, we're calling Lions winning the Super Bowl.
All right. Well, we've hopefully given you some things to think about and chew on as you're getting ready for your fantasy draft if you haven't had it yet. Some top players, maybe some unexpected ones, and some sleepers. That's where you can really set yourself apart from the competition is finding those hidden gems. Anything to add as we wrap up?
If you have any questions, any that you want answered by we non-professional fantasy analysis, just hit us up at our Twitter at GoHitters2021.
Mm-hmm. Or just leave a comment. We're here as well. And you know what? Fantasy football is one of those things where I know there are a lot of professional analysts, but do they really know anything more than us? I mean, there's a little bit of skill, but a lot of this is just let's see what happens.
Luck in the guessing and intuition that you just got that feel, just like that Calvin Ridley, man.
Yeah.
You watch. If he comes back, like I'm gonna go and get my degree in fantasy football analysis, and I'll be on ESPN next year doing this instead of sitting in an upstairs next to these guitars here and strumming the guitars up on my head, you know.
Yeah. That's not how you play guitar, but we'll try. All right. Well, thanks for stopping by. This has been the Goat Herders podcast. I'm Brandon.
And I'm Garrett.